Hello, this is the Shiny Strawman, back again with another video. I'm going over the Scarlet Violet ban list for November 29th, 2022. This may be out of date in the future, so please be careful when you're watching this that you're not watching... Like, if something else gets banned, make sure that you're watching the most up-to-date version. This is my 5th time recording this, oh god. Alright, let's go over the quick bans that we had. Alright, so we got Sneasel, because it's got this absurd base stat total, because it was really a first stage Pokemon. And it's got a good move pool of like Iron Crash, Brick Break, Sword Stance, and it's got this absurd speed tier, which means that if you want to use a Choice Scarf item, which boosts your speed by 50%, you would have to use something that has at least 16 speed in order to be able to outpace it. And it's also got a stupidly high attack of 95, and can boost it with Sword Stance. And at best you can, like, oh, well, it's got Dark and Ice typing, that means it gets worn down by Stealth Rocks, and it gets worn down, it has a quadruple fighting weakness, so that means you can use Mach Punch. But because of the limited decks, you get neither of those, and even then it's really restrictive team building options that you have to have that. So as a result, Sneasel got banned, and it's way too strong. Sneasel Hisui has same base stat total, and is therefore exceedingly good. It also gets 120 base power stabs in close combat and Gunk Shot. Has Night Slash to hit psychics that would otherwise wall it, as well as ghost types that want to come in on close combat and resist Gunk Shot. Sword Stance once again to get your boosted stats, and then you can do like some Terror type stuff. Also, it doesn't get worn down by Stealth Rocks like Sneasel would. It's not released yet. It'll be released with Pokemon Home, but we're just gonna have to cross that bridge when we get there. But even then, it's got the base stats of a Sneasel. It's going to be outpacing everything and hitting exceedingly strong. It's banned. It's way too good. Next, we have Scyther. It's got, even more so than Sneasel, it's got some absurd base stats. Oh, god. 105 speed, 110 attack. It's going to be hitting hard, hitting fast. It's got Stab U-Turn. It's got Stab 10th Edition Aerial Ace. Night Slash to be able to hit stuff close combat. It's got this wonderful move pool because it's a Generation 1 Pokemon. And it's like, oh, well, what about, you know, how Sneasel had the ice weakness, ice type, so that means it's got this really bad weakness to Stealth Rock. Why not just use, I don't know, like Eviolite, and then you can get set up on. Well, then you can just run Heavy Duty Boots because it's got such naturally high bulk that it can be able to take hits, and even then it's got U-Turn, and then just outpace things because of its speed tier, and it's just so strong. It's just way too much. And as a result, it got banned, because they somehow thought this was a good idea to put in Little Cup. Gosh darn it, Game Freak. Next we have Basculin White Stripe. This is also coming in with Home, and the main issue there is, like, it's not released yet, but even then, it's still really broken on baseline. 98 speed means it gets up to 20, and Scyther is just way too fast, as is, and then now we have another 20 speeder that has 18 attack, Aqua Jet, and Wave Crash. Wave Crash is a new move introduced in Generation 9 that has 120 base power, and it's Water Flare Blitz. It's crazy. And then you also have adaptability, which means that your stab is 2 instead of 1.5, which means instead of 180 power, it's 240, and you can boost it even more with Terra-type Water. It's absurd, and it shouldn't be allowed, and it's not. So that's why that's banned. It's way too fast, way too strong, and adaptability makes it even more strong. Hooray! Next we have Tandemouse. So Tandemouse was banned originally because they thought that it got Population Bomb, and because of how rolls work in Little Cup, we thought it would be like, oh, well, even if you're doing 1 damage 10 times, when your HP stats are like 21, you're doing like half damage. And because you can run Wide Lens, and you got a pretty decent speed tier of getting up to 18, you can basically OHKO, even if it's like, if you get like 2, okay, cool, then you're basically OHKOing things, and it's very dumb. But just with Population Bomb, it could start KOing a whole bunch of the tier, and it's like, oh, why don't you use a Ghost type? Well, it gets Crunch. So no, you can't. Turns out it probably doesn't get Population Bomb is the thing. And that's because of how egg moves work, so this is likely going to be unbanned sometime in the near future. It's like, Population Bomb was the reason why it's broken, but without it, it's not going to be too special. It doesn't even get Tidy Up. But just to reiterate the Population Bomb point, if you hit for 1 damage 10 times, you're going to be doing like half health to this. And that's only on like a really good resist. So what happens if it's onto like Basculin and it doesn't have enough bulk to be able to take it? Like, cool, if it takes rocks and spikes, it tries to switch in, it just dies. It would have been really, really ridiculous, but because it doesn't get it, it's going to be freed soon. Now, we didn't know at first how egg moves worked, so I don't blame the council for that. But it's an understandable mistake to make. It's like, okay, we see this functionally 200 power base move, 200 base power move, and it's going to be on this weird mice. Oh lordy, I can't wait to see that in action. They decided that they were going to quick ban it. And those 5 were the first of the quick bans. We also have Dragon Rage, Sonic Boom, and Baton Pass ban. Baton Pass will become important later as we discuss potential bans in the future, but Sonic Boom and Dragon Rage are obviously really broken when you only have 23 HP, and there's a move that just does a baseline 20. It would basically OHKO anything without 20 HP, and then you'd have to try and outspeed it if you want to be able to get any progress in. Alright, so then we got to the first round of bans after the quick bans. At the start of the generation, we had Murkrow. Murkrow is really strong because it has 85 in both attack and special attack, as well as a really good speed tier, letting it get up to 19 speed. As a result, it can run effectively either of a physically based set, Brave Bird, Sucker Punch. You can also get U-Turn, and then you can use Prankster Tailwind, so that means that you can even support yourself if you're doing a Nasty Plot set, and you can still run Nasty Plot because you have good special attack. So it's really hard to be able to say, oh, well, you know, I know that this Murkrow is going to be running physical, or Noah's going to be running special, so I have to go into my dedicated physical and or special wall. Well, it doesn't really work that way because of how strong Murkrow is. So good luck. It's got way too many options, and because of Prankster, you can't even stop the Tailwind. So it's like, oh, well, I got the Murkrow. Don't worry, it's going to go down. All right, well, now to set up a Tailwind for a sweeper in the back, and you can't deal with that now because what you use to get rid of Murkrow is going to die to it. Wonderful. It's just way too strong. And as a result, it was banned. Next, we have Snorunt. It has Moody, and Moody's just really, really uncompetitive because it boosts 1 stat and then reduces another, but it's a sharp boost for 1 stat, and then a decrease is only -1. So that means that if you get like minus defense plus speed, and then you get plus defense minus speed, you still have +1 defense, +1 speed, and that's already really ridiculous. Especially because you can protect and substitute stall really easily. It's very uncompetitive because it's just like, oh, well, I'm going to spin the lottery wheel and see what boosts I get. It's not very good. It's not very healthy. As a result, it was banned. Next, we have Metatite, and this is banned because it has pure power, and because even though it only gets 14, that's 28. That means it can punch a whole bunch of walls. You know, it's like, oh, well, you know, the Tailwind thing? Well, guess what? You have Metatite for that, and that's why it's probably another reason why it was banned, but just having 28 attack on a single Mon that has really good Fighting Psychic as a typing, that means that it's really hard to resist it, in addition to Ice Punch, Fire Punch, and also Thunder Punch. It's really, really hard to wall, and it's stupidly powerful. So good luck trying to deal with this. And then the most recent ban that we had was Dunsparce, and this one seems really odd because it doesn't really fit in with everything else. It's like, oh, well, this one's like, it's way too fast, way too strong, get hit in either attack or special attack. That's kind of weird. And then Moody's just very uncompetitive because it's all random. And then Metatite is just going to break through everything. So why Dunsparce? Although it's got a nice stat spread, 170, 65. That's good bulk. I mean, what can it really do? Well, the thing that got banned was that it has Glare Headbutt, and the reason why that's important is because it also has Serene Graze, so you can have your secondary effect chances doubled. So that means that your Headbutt has a 60% chance to fledge, and then your Glare paralyzes the target so that way they're slower than you, and has a 25% chance of preventing them from moving. So that means that even if you only get the really okay 15 speed, you're just going to be faster than everything, and then you get to flinch it down. Oh, well, why don't you just use a ghost type? Well, it also gets bite, and that is the exact same thing. So, good luck with that. And then, if you wanted to, you can also use coil, and that means that you get even bulkier. So, you boost your attack and your defense. So that means, like, oh, I'm going to try to revenge kill it with, like, my Sprigatito or my Murflet, but I can't because it's literally just too bulky because it's got 100 HP and a lot of defense. And then, oh, darn, I got it down to, like, 50% HP. I can finally get this. It's got Roost, too, so it can heal up. And even though it's like, oh, it's only 8, it's only 8. That shouldn't be too bad. It's bad. It's bad. It's way too much. It's already way too much. You can't deal with this if it's got that much bulk on it. So, because of that, it got banned. But then also, if you wanted to, you can run a Crit Me Not set because it has Coil and Amnesia. And unless you're getting like multiple crits because of how good it is baseline, you're not breaking through it. And then you can also use Terra Blast, which is already stab, and you're doing alright with your special attack stat. It's not awful. But then you can Terra into another type. Then you can just Terra Blast and go through entire teams. And then one of the best things you could use to answer that is, well, doesn't this just lose to Ghost? Well, not after you Terra, but before, yes. But you can Terra and then also Rattled. If you get hit by a Bug, Dark, or Ghost type move, you get speed. Which means you can really effectively sweep with it, because nothing gets... You just get hit by like 1 or 2 Shadow Balls and you're faster than the entire tier. There's actually a really good video by Grizz, I'll link this down in the description, showing how exactly it sweeps every team. And it's really, really stupid and really, really brainless. But it's really, really entertaining to watch. But it will just blow through the entirety of teams because you can't kill it because of Amnesia, and then you get a whole bunch of attack boosts with Coil, and then because of how Terra Blast works, because you're terastallized, your attack's greater than your special attack, so that means that you can really effectively attack into stuff. It just was really unhealthy. Oh boy, and that's all of them for now. So it's a kind of small ban list, don't you think? It's, well, Snyther, Sneasel, 2 things that aren't even released yet. Tandemouse, which is probably going to get freed, and you have Murkrow, Meditite, Dunsparce. It's only really 5 things. So what else is going to get banned? Well, my money's on Girafarig and Misdreavus. I'm also going to go over Flittle, but that'll be in a little bit, and I think that deserves its own special section. We're going to go with Girafarig first, because it's got a lot of stuff going for it. First and foremost, it's got great set diversity. Like Rest, Calm Mind, Early Bird, go for it. You get really bulky and you run max defense, that means it's really hard to take down, and then you also Calm Mind up a bunch, and then you have these really powerful Psychics. And then it's like, oh, well, can't I use Pawniard to beat against this? Because, I mean, it's Psychic. Well, no, you can't, because Terra type exists. So that means that you can just Terra Fighting and instantly KO it, because it's got a quadruple fighting weakness. You can use a Wish Pash. I changed the set. But you have screens, you have Reflect Light Screen, you have Twin Beam. Twin Beam is actually kind of special because a new mon that was introduced is Glimmet. It's got Toxic Debris, so if you hit it with a physical move, then it will spread Toxic Spikes. But if you use Twin Beam, that guarantees the KO because they like running Focus Sash, because you get up a single layer of, like, you can get up rocks, and then you get hit, and then you set up Toxic Spikes automatically, and then you can run, like, I don't know, Spikes if you're faster than whatever your opponent's running, or something. Like, you can also Explode. You have options, but if you use Twin Beam, then that means you're faster on baseline because you have 19 speed, and then you just OHKO it. It's whatever. But also, this gets Wish, because it can, and then you can do stuff like this, and it becomes really hard to deal with because you can pass wishes to your teammates, like Misdreavus, like Pawniard, or you can pass one to Flittle, and that means that it can set up twice or whatever. But you have options when it comes to Wish, but just having Wish support, especially when Recover and stuff is really nerfed, is going to be hard to deal with. It also gets Sap Zipper. You can use Early Bird on the rest set. Actually, if you want to be really devilish, one of the new mons that got added is Toadschool. And Mycelium Might. Status moves have lower priority and ignore target's abilities, and one of the most important things to use with it is Spore. And Spore will bypass Sap Zipper. But you like Sap Sipper because if your opponent's trying to Giga Drain into you with Toad School or use any sort of grass move, you just have immunity to it. But then also, okay, well then I have Early Bird instead, and that means that I have like 1 turn of sleep, which means that you using Spore practically did nothing. Because you're trading you acting for 1 turn to get the Spore off, and then your opponent having 1 turn of sleep because of Early Bird. Like, you have to get... How sleep works is that you have 1 to 3 turns of being asleep. So if you get the 3, it's like, okay, cool, that's good. That means that it'll be asleep for only 2 turns, actually, because the sleep counter drops by 2. If you get 1 or 2, it's only going to be asleep for 1 turn, and then it's going to wake up. And then it's functionally like, well, what was the point of doing that? Because you've wasted 1 of your turns to waste 1 of your opponent's turns, but that's it, and you don't get any more advantage out of it. So it can be really hellish to run that, because people like sleeping this, and then also you can still use Rest on it to get more HP back, if you don't want to use Wish, because Wish is a bit exploitable. Because, well, what happens if you want, like, if you rest and you have Early Bird, then you can probably come back in and it's, oh, I only have like 1 turn, or I've already wasted a turn. And then you can Wish and you can pass it, but sometimes you're just in a really awkward spot where you don't really want to protect because your opponent could start setting up with what their own Girafarig that has a nasty plot, something like that. Like, it can be a bit exploitable to use Wish, but then you can use Rest instead with Early Bird, and it's really good. But then also you have boost. You have, in addition to Calm Mind boosting, you have Nasty Plot boosting, and that's even worse, especially when it has really good 90 special attack. And then you have Psychic. You have we have Thunderbolt if you want to hit some flying types, or you want to hit Quaxley, the water type. But then also you have Terra Blast fighting again, so that way you can get over Pawniard, and that's all really good. So you have all these like really good specially offensive sets. That should be manageable, right? You just have to worry about the special attack. No. It has a physical set, too! You have Psychic Fangs for breaking through screens, because screens is really popular, because it's a brand new meta game. So wonderful. Then you have Earthquake for breaking over Pawniard, and then you have Trailblaze for getting a speed boost. So that means that your 19 speed goes up to 28, so that means it's really hard to revenge kill with a Choice Scarfer. Wonderful! And then you also have Crunch for dealing with other Girafarig or Misdreavus. One of the most important things to note is that one of the best things to do with a Girafarig is your own Girafarig, because you really like Terra-type fighting for Pawniard. So if you Terra-type into fighting, and then your opponent has their own of their Girafarig, then you're going to take super effective damage from Psychic. But then if you don't Terra, then you don't really have all that good of an option to deal with it, because the Psychic's resisted, Terra Blast is not hitting too hard, and then Thunderbolt's not going to be hitting hard either, so what do you do here? Well, simple. You have to deal with it with the opposing Giraffe. And that makes things really complicated. But then if you're running Physical Life Orb and they're running like Sap Sipper or Early Bird, then you can just hit them with Crunch Trailblaze and you get faster than them, and then you deal a whole bunch of damage for Crunch, and it's really hard for them to deal with. And then also, if you want to, you can run a special Life Orb set, because it also gets Hyper Beam, so you can go back to Generation 1. Hooray! But all of these are like really hard to deal with on their own. And like, oh, well, what kind of play do you have? Because I mean, there's got to be something. Like, obviously, besides the Girafarig, you have Misdreavus. And one of the things that you like to do with Misdreavus is switch into the normal Terra Blast before it Terra types. Because Terra Blast is normal and it's specially offensive. So it's actually a pretty good stab move for Girafarig to use before it does a Terra type. So it doesn't really mind that all that much. And it's got this really good special bulk of 85, and it can use Dark Pulse, and it can hit it back in return. So that's all fine and dandy, but what else you got? Well, there's a Toad School, as mentioned before, because it's got 100 base special defense, so that's pretty good. You can take some special hits really well. But then the issue there is that, well, what happens if they're running the physical set, and your physical defense is really, really meager, and they can just Psychic Fangs into you twice, and then you can get really hurt. And then what happens if they're running Early Bird, try to Spore them, and it doesn't work out? And it's also got such really good bulk gun baseline that even if you try to use Knockoff, it's not going to do anywhere near as much damage. So it's really complicated. What, do you want to use this? Do you not want to use this? Because, I mean, it doesn't have a good grass immunity. I mean, you could be letting it get a Trailblaze up, or you could take a Psychic Advance to the face, but also you could be getting a nasty plot, and then you'll be able to deal with it. So you don't know. But then finally, you got Poniard. You can run like Eviolite, you can run Berry Juice, and then you can run Choice Scarf. Like you got options on this. But then you have like Night Slash. You don't have Knockoff yet, and I'll touch on that point in a sec. That's actually one of the most important reasons why these things are where Misdreavus and Giraffe are so hard to deal with. Excuse me. But you have Toadskull, Poniard, and then you have Sucker Punch. That's really important. But then the issue is that with the Terra types, as before, what happens if you Terra type into something that resists or is not resists or is not weak to? Like on the physical one, I can do Terra type Ground, and that gives me an electric immunity, as well as the fact that I no longer take as much damage from Sucker Punch. Well, that's a bit of an issue, isn't it? Because that means that one of the best ways to revenge kill this, especially if it's like a Trailblaze up, is priority, and then you're going to this, and that means it's much harder to get rid of. So that's a bit hard. So that means that you have like 4 options of dealing with this, and then 2 of them can be really unreliable because it could be running the physical set, and you just sort of bypass your checks. So what can you do? And you can't even tell until this comes out and actually starts doing things, because it could be either. It could even be screens, and like, okay, well, now I have my Poniard up, and it can probably use, like, I don't know, Brick Break, actually, because so that way it can break past screens. But then the issue there, and that takes us into the other more broken mod, is Misdreavus. And that's because it's also got these wonderful boosting moves. It's got Nasty Plot, and it's got Calm Mind, and it's got these really cool Terra types where it can go into like Terra Fighting, Terra Dark, Terra Electric if you want to have no weaknesses. There's way too much for it going on. Way too much. Ugh. But yeah, like you can Terra type Fighting, and then you can use Terra Blast, or you can use Dark Pulse on baseline, so that way you can beat over Girafarig. And it's like, oh, well, what happens if I run into Fighting or Dark, and then I'm my own Misdreavus? Well, then I can just Terra Fairy, and then I also have Dazzling Gleam in the back, so that means I don't have to worry about it. So I can just use Dazzling Gleam, and then I can Terra Fairy on them using Terra Fighting, and it's fine. I have this great stab option, and now my Misdreavus checks their Misdreavus, and their Misdreavus does not check mine. And then I can also do Nasty Plot Substitute with Berry Juice, Nasty Plot Substitute with Eviolite and Terra Blast, and then also, if I wanted to, Hex Will-O-Wisp. It also gets Pain Split. So, although it's more reliable, it's like, oh, well, no, I don't have to worry about special attack versus regular attack, so it's going to be special attack. It's still really hard to deal with, because it really likes running Substitute, or it can run Will-O-Wisp. So even if you're like, oh, well, I could go into my Poniard, it'll be fine, but like, what happens if it gets burned? And that means that it's having a much rougher time dealing with the Misdreavus right in front of it, as well as the Girafarig in the back, possibly, that also wants to set up. And, well, what happens if it also wants to get rid of screens? And this Misdreavus hasn't even terrored into fighting yet, and it just blocks Brick Break. So that means that you can't get rid of screens, which means that you have to try to Night Slash or Sucker Punch into it. But what happens if it's got Will-O-Wisp's Substitute? Then what are you going to do? It's got way too many options. And then Toadskull, although it can deal with this a lot better, but even then, it doesn't appreciate getting burned, because Knockoff is probably its best option into Misdreavus because of how specially bulky it is. Now, you can still use something like Power Whip if you wanted to, but it's not going to do anywhere near as much damage. And then Spore is pretty useless when it's negative priority and your opponent really likes using Substitute a lot, so that way it doesn't have to deal with that, and it can get a free turn of setup. So what are you going to do? It's just got way too much going on. And although this has one other weakness that Girafarig doesn't always have. Like, obviously, it can use Trailblaze, and then it gets up to this really good speed stat. But Misdreavus doesn't have that benefit, and it can get outsped by Choice Scarfers. But then, here comes a little wrinkle in the mix. One of the things that we don't have this banned yet. We do not have Arena Trap banned in Little Cup. And in some metagames, it's not, like, in OU, it's banned. It's always banned, but in Little Cup, it's not. Because the only Pokemon that gets it is Diglett, and it's not really this great stat spread. But here's the thing. Misdreavus is completely immune to any and all forms of trapping, and that makes it a really big issue when you're trying to get rid of it. So that means that if you're running like Choice Scarf Gothita, well, this is a ghost type. It doesn't really care about that. It just gets out of there because it's got Levitate plus ghost typing. It doesn't get trapped by Shadow Tag. It's whatever. And then Diglett can't trap it because it's got Levitate. So that means that if you want to be able to deal with this, you have to attack into it. And then what happens if it's got a Will-O-Wisp? Oh, darn, the thing that I'm trying to attack into it with, it can't break its substitutes because it's burned now. It's exceedingly unhealthy because it has all these things going for it. Because it's got this ghost type on baseline that lets it check... Oh, also... Well, it's got this ghost type on baseline that means that it blocks Brick Break, as well as letting it take some attacks from Girafarig. But then the issue is that because it's a ghost type, and ghost is super effective against ghost, one of the things you like doing is switching in your own Misdreavus against the opposing Misdreavus. Because you can Shadow Ball into it and just super effective damage. And also because of your special bulk, you can like take a hit, and also because you're the same speed stat, you can force a speed tie, try to beat your opponents with yours. And it's very, very unhealthy because one of the best checks to Girafarig is Girafarig, and one of the best checks to Misdreavus is Misdreavus, and then the other best check to Misdreavus is Girafarig, and then the other best check to Girafarig is Misdreavus. So these two just keep on bouncing off of each other, like, oh no, I'm tier king, no, I'm tier king, and you literally can't deal with this because they're both here, and they also have the exact same checks that you want to run. You want to run Toadstool, you want to run Pawniard, and there's like, oh, we want to run Diglett so that we can trap Giraffe. Well, now you're just fodder for Missy. I want to trap it. No, you can't. It's too bad. It doesn't get trapped. Deal with it. Oh, and it's just so unhealthy. Because they each require very different things in order to be dealt with. Like Missy, you can use a Choice Scarfer, and then it forces a really awkward switch. Because like, what happens if I want to do Rufflet Choice Scarf? All right, cool. Excuse me. Let me get a water real quick. All right, so but the issue there is like, okay, so if I want to run Choice Scarf Rufflet in order to deal with Misdreavus, and like you can do like Hustle, Aerial Ace, and it's like, oh, it was really good damage. But then what happens if Girafarig gets a Trailblaze up, and then that just becomes fodder? What happens if I want to use something to deal with Misdreavus? Like, oh well, I have Pawniard and Toadstool to deal with it, but now they're crippled because I still need them to check Girafarig, and now they're not healthy enough to do it. So that means I have to run like 2 to 3 checks just for these two, and they're shared. And then also I want to run my own Misdreavus and my own Giraffe because of how good they are as well. So there's just these really, really over-centralizing, exceedingly powerful Pokemon that you have to run like every single team. And perhaps one of the most important things to note is that their base stat total is really, really high. Misdreavus has 435, Girafarig has 455, and that's far and away above basically everything else in the tier. The next best ones that you get are Mudbray, 385. It's got, you know, good HP, good defense, but then the issue is that it's got really low speed, and it's a ground type, and the problem with the ground type is that Misdreavus has Levitate, so if you want to be able to hit it hard, you can't, because its immunity removes. So what are you going to do? Then you have Litleo, and that's got some pretty decent, you know, it's got some pretty decent stats. 73 special attack, 72 special attack. 73 special attack, 72 speed. But then the issue there is that it has Moxie as its hidden ability, so it's meant to be this great physical sweeper. So that means that you want to run both attack and special attack investment, and it just doesn't work out. And even if you're running special attack, both Misdreavus and Girafarig have pretty good bulk. So even if, well, especially Misdreavus, and one of the types that Litleo has a stab is normal, so it can't even hit it with one of its stabs, which is pretty bad. And then we have Larvesta, which is the next best thing, because it has 360 BST. And although it's got a really good bug typing for threatening Giraffe, it's basically useless against Misdreavus, because Misdreavus resists the U-turn. And if you want to be able to outspeed it, you only get up to 16 speed on baseline with a positive nature. And the issue with that is that if you want to outspeed Missy or Giraffe, and even if Giraffe gets the Trailblaze, you can't do it, you have to run a Choice Scarf. And if you run a Choice Scarf, well, then the issue there is that you're significantly less bulky. And if you want to be able to hit Missy neutrally, and then you run Flare Blitz, and that has 33% recoil, which means that you're even less bulkier. And Misdreavus is just going to do so much damage to you. And you can't really win there. It's just, there's way too much that both of these can do in terms of stats, in terms of move pool, in terms of all this stuff. You can't touch them. But perhaps the most important thing that's a lot more of a hidden issue is the fact that knockoff basically does not exist in Gen 9 Little Cup. It's really bad. You only have 7 mons that run it. And I even discussed that in the post. I was like, well, we have very little knockoff. And one of the things that would work before is that in Gen 8, we had these really centralizing mons. We had stuff like, let's see here. We had Mean Foo, we had Marionette. It's like, okay, yeah, well, they're both really good, but then you can knock them off. And one of the things that makes them really, really bad is that even though this is really good stat spread, you got like 14 defense, and you got Regenerator and whatever. If you remove the Eviolite, it made it significantly easier to wear down over time. Like, if Grookey goes and tries to Bonky Glide it with Life Orb Grassy Surge, it's going to do significantly more, and even though it has Regenerator, it can get some back. It's not going to get it all. With Eviolite on, it probably would. And then also you have stuff like Defensive Porygon. It really needs this Eviolite if it wants to be able to check stuff. If it wants to be able to check Abra, if it wants to be able to check, like, even Grookey or Tyrant, it really needs that Eviolite. And if it gets knocked off, then it's still a lot of progress, because that means that it can't come in later on in the game and be like, oh, hey, I'm back again. It'll just get absolutely destroyed. But then in current gen, nothing, like, it's so scant, because all you're getting is 7 mons, and 2 of them you shouldn't even consider running, because it's Makuhita and Ralts, and they both have less than 250 base stat total. Hold on a sec. Alright, that's better. Alright, so, but the main issue is that Makuhita and Ralts, you wouldn't even consider running even if they do have knockoff, because of how slow and how frail they are. Like, yes, my Ralts is going to be able to take on a Misdreavus or a Giraffe and be able to knock them off. It's just not going to work. So you have to make do with any of these 5 options, which are, they have at least passable base stat totals. Alright, let's start with the first one. We've got Shrill. It gets knockoff. But the issue there is that its attack's kind of low. It's got 13. Alright, well, it's kind of weird on baseline, but then also you have 40, 35, 35 as your bulk, and it's really, really bad. And it's poison normal. So that means you're a really, really poor matchup against Girafarig. And then even with a positive nature, you only get up to 18 speed, which is really, really bad, because you don't outspeed either Misdreavus or Giraffe, so Misdreavus can go first. And that's really, really bad. Really, really, really bad. And it's not even stab knockoff either. So that means that even if you're doing damage into them, it's not going to be enough. It's still going to be a kind of weak hit, even if it's 97.5 base power. It's just not enough. And 65 attack isn't awful, but it could be significantly better. And then next you got Tinkatink, and it's like, oh, you know, like Eviolite, knockoff, Thunderwave, Play Rough, Stealth Rock, and you know, it's got like a pretty decent special defense stat. But then you realize it's got a 45 attack stat, and even if it wants to be able to beat into these things, 45 attack is nowhere near good enough. It's genuinely awful. Like, that's not going to be able to... I'm not sure if it's going to be able to break sub, but just doing that into Missy or Giraffe, especially when Missy can use a Nasty Plot, Giraffe can use an Earthquake on this, it's just going to be way too much. And, like, even if it wants to be able to take a hit from either of these, like, oh, I can invest in special defense or defense. Alright, so then you need to have stuff to attack in order to be able to threaten them effectively with knockoff or play rough. And that just doesn't happen all that much, because you have such a very bad attack stat. What are you going to do against these? They're just going to be way too fast, way too strong. Like, one of the most important things is that just the base stat total is just not there. You don't have enough stats to be able to be like, you know what, I can duke it out with the big dogs. You just don't. And then next we have Wingull, whose stats are even worse somehow. It has 40, 30, 30 in terms of bulk. Tinkatink had 50, 45, 64, which isn't bad, but it's not enough. And then we have Wingull, which has 40, 30, 30, and has an even worse 30 attack. So even if you want to knock off into Girafarig and Misdreavus, and you can speed tie them, good luck trying to not die in the process because of how bad your stats are. It's nowhere near good enough, and you can. And perhaps this is, yeah, perhaps the best way to put it is that because of the knockoff being so limited, like if you look at the items that I had, they're really, really important. You got Eviolite. Eviolite, boost your defense and special defense by 1.5. And then we got Berry Juice, restores 20 HP when you're at half or half HP or less. And that means that essentially it's a full restore when you're running 22 HP. And because you can't knock off those items and be able to reliably deal with them anywhere near as well, that means that you have to keep on relying on stray hits. And those stray hits are going to be significantly less good when Misdreavus has 65 defense and 85 special defense, and they're all at +1 at all times. How do you break through this? It's way too bulky. And then probably the two best knockoff users, Toadstool and Zorua. Toadstool, like, it's got knockoff, and that's really good. And you have like Rapid Spin and Spore. Okay, you kind of always want those three. And then you run like Special Defense Investment. But then, what? As I said earlier, what about the Giraffe? And what if it runs a physical set? And what happens if, you know, like, well, I also want to kind of deal with Poniard as well. So do I want to run Power Whip in order to hit Missy hard, or do I want to run Earth Power in order to be able to hit, hit Poniard, so that way my Giraffe and Misdreavus can do a lot of work. But if I split between special attack and attack, that means that my knockoff's not going to be hitting as hard. So what do I do here? There's just way too much going on for Toadstool to be able to reasonably deal with both Giraffe and Misdreavus. Because like even if I want to run Power Whip in order to hit Misdreavus, because it's got a less defense as opposed to special defense, well, Giraffe just eats it because it's got Sap Sipper. But what happens if it's got Early Bird and I want to Spore it? Neither of those work. And then Zora was probably the one that it's probably the best out of them, because it's got knockoff on Stab, and although it's got the same attack stat of Flittle, at least it's got Stab, and that's going to make a lot of difference. And it's got a pretty good speed tier as well. But then the issue there is like, oh yeah, you got knockoff, Sucker Punch, U-turn, Taunt, and this is all like really good stuff because you can U-turn like the Giraffe coming in on something that it thinks that it can set up on, or, you know, like knocking off into Misdreavus or whatever. The issue there is that they're both still running like Terra Fighting or Terra Fairy. Well, Missy can run Terra Fairy, but both of those really like to see Dark types, and they can just nuke Zorua anyway. And that also means that you have a fighting weakness on your team because you kind of want to run Zorua and also Poniard because Poniard's really, really good. So what do? You can't deal with these really well passively because, oh, I just remembered, Levitate ignores spikes and toxic spikes. So even if you're like, oh, I'll set up spikes and then Misdreavus won't be able to handle it, nah, it won't even have to deal with it because it's got Levitate. It still has to worry about rocks, and Giraffe still has to worry about spikes and toxic spikes. But it's so hard to be able to deal with these offensively or defensively. Like, you want to use knockoff to get progress? Well, good luck on trying to find a mom that'll be able to do it well. You want to be able to attack into it? Well, their base stats are just so high that they're so hard to deal with. It's pretty ridiculous how good these mons are, and there's no good way of dealing with it. Whew. I need to take another drink. But in total, these guys have communally shared checks, both of which have themselves in there, plus Toadstool, plus Poniard, and that's kind of it. So the counterplay is exceedingly limiting, and they can have a whole bunch of different sets. As such, I think they definitely need to be banned. But then, what about the little wild card I was talking about earlier? What about Flittle? What's that one about? It's a new Pokemon that was introduced, and what was interesting about Flittle is that it got the hidden ability Speed Boost. And we saw Speed Boost before, and it was on Carvanha, and it wasn't... Carvanha was balanced, so, you know, why isn't Flittle? Flittle seems like even worse. It's got a worse base stat total. Its attack and special attack aren't anywhere near as good as Carvanha's is. Why are you saying that Carvanha is so fine, but then Flittle's not for whatever reason? And that's because it's got some absolutely busted stuff. So, you want to run max defense, and then you can run max speed. Like you want to run something like this, and then you can dump something into like special attack or special defense. But the issue here with Flittle is that with speed boost plus calm mind plus store power coming off of stab, and then you can run Terra type fighting to go over Poniard, you can really easily run away with the game. Like, you know how I said before, it's like, oh, well, you know, Girafarig has Trailblaze, and that allows it to go past Scarfers. Well, Flittle gets that naturally. It doesn't even have to worry about, oh, like, using a move to get my speed boost. Nah, I already have my speed boost, and it's already coming off of a pretty good speed stat that gets up to 17. You don't really need to run 18 speed, but like, it's already really fast on baseline, so it doesn't need a lot of investment there. And then the issue is, well, I can't use my Scarfer to revenge kill it, because even though it keeps on getting these Calm Mind boosts and gets bulkier on the special side and deals more damage on the special side, and has stored power for keep on getting these boosts, which this boosts by 20 for every turn because of speed boost. You keep on getting all these boosts and boosts and boosts and boosts and boosts, and then you just have this unstoppable like +6 speed, and then +2 special attack, +2 special defense, Terra Blast fighting Flittle, and it's just so impossible to deal with. Alright, so that sounds really bad. Why didn't I put it with Giraffe and Misdreavus? Well, first and foremost, its base stats are pretty abhorrent. It's got 30 defense and 30 HP. So, like, I don't know, isn't it still too powerful because of the Calm Mind boosts and the Terra Blast? Conditionally. I think the main reason why I don't want Flittle gone is because the main sets that Girafarig and Misdreavus want to run are still specially offensive. Giraffe can suppress you with a physical set, but it doesn't have a boosting move. Nasty Plot and Calm Mind are both special, and that means that there's already a lot of pressure on your opponent's specially defensive checks. So if you want to run Poniard, Toad School, stuff like that, okay, well, I have to use them to deal with Giraffe and Misdreavus, but, you know, like once those are done, my thing's going to be weakened, possibly burned because of Misdreavus, Will-O-Wisp, possibly really weakened because it took an Earthquake or like a heavy neutral attack. So I don't see how that's an issue. I don't like. You already have the checks. Well, there's just so much pressure on them as well as like on baseline. But then the thing is that because this has such a low base stat total and has such a reliance on Terra type, I think if Giraffe and Missy go, the meta is going to shift a lot, because that means that you can no longer run just like these two as special attackers and put a lot of pressure on the builder that way. What am I talking about? So, like, you still like to see, like, you want to use Poniard for this, you want to use Toad School for this, and then you can kind of use Tinkatink for it if you wanted to. But all of these wouldn't really mind if Flittle is the only thing that it really has to deal with. Like, maybe Ghastly comes in, and that's significantly more manageable because it's got less HP, less defense, less special defense. Misdreavus is just so bulky that if you're running Ghastly instead, alright, well, you know, before you had these like really odd situations where it's like, well, I want to be able to knock off into Misdreavus, but Misdreavus is just so bulky on baseline that if I knock off into it, it's not even going to do 50%, if that. Well, you do that on Ghastly. Ghastly's dead. That's it. It becomes significantly less pressure to have to predict right into Misdreavus all the time. It gives you a lot more breathing room because Ghastly is so frail that I no longer have to be like, oh god, what if it gets up a Nasty Plot? Well, it's actually a lot easier to do, a lot easier to handle, because it's nowhere near as bulky and can't take all these hits. So I can just run, like, my Toad School's more healthy, my Poniard's more healthy, and then, like, obviously Ghastly can still, like, Terra fighting. But then the issue there is that, like, obviously Misdreavus could do the Terra fighting thing, and Gothita could come revenge kill. But this is so squishier that Gothita can do that more reliably. It's whatever. And I also think that Flittle has an issue of very high ceiling of how well it can do and very low floor of what it can do. And I'm going to go back to Gen 8 and talk about Carvanha real quick. If I can find a team. Yep. So Carvanha. It really liked running Flip Turn Crunch, Psychic Things Protect, and had a Life Orb. And it was really threatening on the baseline, because what you can do is that you can crunch into Ferroseed and you still do like 40%, even though that was one of the things that was supposed to check it. And it was really threatening. But here's the thing, it only ever was limited by the life orb and how much damage that could output. You could only ever crunch so many times, and you would never ever get above where that crunch was. It would only ever do this set amount. And although it had this much lower ceiling of like, well, there's no guarantee that I'll sweep with it, because you still have to worry about like Mean Foo and Coughing, and they're still pretty tanky, and they can hit this kind of well, especially when you have 20 defenses and you can't boost them. The main issue is that, like, although it's really powerful, it would only ever get so big, so powerful. I can check it with Mean Foo if it goes into like neutral hits. I can throw it in a whole bunch of hazards, because you see flip turn here, it really likes switching out, because if it can't always Oko things. So Mean Foo could take a hit from it, and then this would flip turn out, and then you can like U-turn with Foo. So that means that Carvana had to play really careful. It can't play very aggressive with it. It can't just be like, all right, so I'm just gonna like, I don't know, go for game now and just start spamming Calm Mind. It had to be really careful when it came in. How much damage was it taking? How many charges of Life Orb did I have left? It had to be very careful with it, and it would always do a lot of work if you played it correctly. But it could do always a lot of work because of how strong it was on baseline. But then the issue with Flittle is that you're using stored power. And is stored power really good at a late game sweep? Absolutely. It's really fantastic if you get like 2 Calm Mind boosts, and then also you got speed boosts anyway, and that'll be boosting your power. So you can get up to like 80 base power on turn 1, because you have your +1 special attack, +1 special defense, +1 speed. And that's cool and all, but you need those turns. You need them. You can't go without them if you want to be able to sweep with Flittle. It's very weak on baseline. Like, if you want to like Terra Blast into a Poniard, all right, cool. You used up your Terra, and then Toadschool can, it can use its neutral coverage of like Power Whip. It can use Spore on you, and then you're just stuck, and you can't do too much against the situation. Now, it's still very powerful, because then you can do stuff like, oh, I can do Berry Juice, and then I can do Protect if I wanted to get a guaranteed speed boost. And then if I wanted to, I can forego Calm Mind entirely, so that way I can substitute, because I don't really need the boost against Poniard, and I can just Terra Blast into it, it dies, and then because I have the speed boost, stored power is going to get a lot of damage as is. And it's just really, really ridiculous of how, like, this can spiral out of control. The worst thing that it can do is just, like, die and practically do nothing. And that's the floor, is that it gets, like, maybe, like, 1 or 2 boosts and then dies to, like, Poniard or Toadschool, because you already had to use up your Terra Blast earlier. Or it'll just sweep your opponent's entire team because it can 6-0, because it just gets all these Calm Minds and stuff, and it's so impossible to deal with. But I think that if we remove the Giraffe and Misdreavus, we have a lot less restrictive of a metagame, and people would always really want to run Toadschool. And is Toadschool bad? No, it's still good. But the main issue that it has is that it doesn't have priority, and it can still get worn down. But if you want to have a different Rapid Spinner, well then, you got Quaxley, you got Bramblin, actually. I forgot about this. It gets Shadow Sneak. So if you want to use Bramblin and Shadow Sneak into this, it's going to be super effective, and it can't be resisted by fighting, so that means you're still going to be doing a good amount of damage with it. You want to use Quaxley. It's also got Rapid Spin, and it can be used as a Rapid Spinner, and then it's got Aqua Jet. So both of those are opened up now, because before, Girafarig would just deal with Bramblin. It can't do anything against Sap Zipper, and Ghost gets blanked into it, and then Misdreavus can just hit it with Stab Shadow Ball, and it's whatever. But if you remove the need for Toadschool to be so present because of how high its special defense is, you open up more options. You can be more offensive with it. You can have Aqua Jet, you can have Shadow Sneak. Ghastly even gets Sucker Punch, so you can run a Life Orb set with Sucker Punch. That works too. You have a whole bunch of options to be able to deal with Flittle. And it's not just like, oh, well, you can even run Tinkatink, actually. And, like, obviously it's not going to be doing a whole bunch of damage with knockoff on its 45 base attack. But it can do enough, is the thing, is that it resists the psychic stored power, and even if it Terra's fighting, you still only take neutral damage, and that's not going to be hitting too hard, and you have decent amount of special bulk. And you can be able to deal with Flittle somewhat better, and you can knock it off, you can knock off the Berry Juice, knock off the Eviolite, and make it significantly easier to deal with overall. Whereas in Giraffe and Missing meta, You don't want to see Tinkatink, you don't want to see Quaxley, you don't want to see Ghastly, you don't want to see Bramblin. It opens up more options that you can possibly use to deal with Flittle. And like, although that's all really nice and good, the issue is, well, Flittle still has a lot of options that it can use. It can Terra type into Fire if it wants to, in order to be able to blast through Tinkatink and still have a good matchup against Pawniard. Doesn't that mean you also have to kind of run Quaxley and Ghastly, and also have to run Bramblin as well? Like, doesn't that mean that you have to run those guys? Like, yes, you still have to run those, but I want to see what the meta is like when it stabilizes when we remove Giraffe and Misdreavus. Could it stay? Yes. Will it stay? I'm not expecting it to, because to be fair, its ceiling is frankly absurd, especially with Terra Blast, but I think it deserves a worthwhile look to see, is this new Pokemon really as broken as it is? Because one of the things that's just best at dealing with Flittle is don't let it set up. I've seen quite a few games where what happens is that people see Flittle are like, oh god, it's going to start setting up, I have to go to my Toad School as my counter or whatever, and you just let it get a boost or two, and then it can just start ripping through things. Or you go to Pawniard, it's like, oh, I gotta stop this from sweeping, and then you Terra type into fighting, and then it just demolishes the Pawniard, and it's uncontested basically because you let it get so many speed boosts in a Calm Mind. But I feel like it's in a different class because base stats are awful, and you need quite a bit of support. Actually, probably one of the most important things that I forgot to mention throughout both Giraffe and Misdreavus is that screens is so prevalent, because Impidimp got this great buff because it's got Reflects, Light Screen, and it's also got Parting Shot. And those are all really good moves, because you can Reflect Light Screen, and then if your opponent has to attack into the Impidimp in order to kill it, and even if you're using Pawniard to be able to Brick Break through it, you could A, go to Missy, or B, this also gets Drain Punch, so that means that you can still hit it really effectively anyway. And Pawniard wants none of that. And then, can I just use Defog in order to be able to remove the hazards? No, you can't, because at best you're using Swablu, and Swablu's pretty useless. It's got 40 attack, 40 special attack, and middling speed. It's got some good bulk, but it's not going to be doing much. Rufflet really wants to be attacking when it has Hustle. Rookidee, Noibat, Fomantis, their stats are barely scraping 250. They don't have anywhere near as much to be able to deal with stuff that's like Drifloon. Drifloon's probably the only good user of Defog. And then you have Fletchling, which dropped off ever since Gale Wings got nerfed. Alright, but then what about Psychic Fangs? Let's see what the distribution is on that. It's better, but then the issue is that, okay, but Impidimp's a Dark type, so even if you want to Psychic Fangs into it. Oh, come on now. Even if you want to Psychic Fangs in with Fido, Griever, Growlithe, Houndour, there's still going to be quite a liability, because Impidimp can still alright, cool, you still want to Psychic Fangs into me, that's whatever. I can take that, I can pass it to one of my sweepers like a Choodle, which gets Shell Smash. I can go to Dragon Dance Mon if I want to. I can go on all these Mons, and you get -1 because of Parting Shot, and you have to do all these steps in order to be able to remove it. And there's just so much pressure on you to be able to even get past the screens. And then what happens if I want to pass to Flittle? You know? And you got screens up, and then you just keep on Calm Minding because, alright, well, I'm behind screens, and the opponent's not going to be able to attack me really well. I think I think that if we're going to ban anything, I want Light Clay to be banned. And that's what makes, Giraffe, Missy, and Flittle even more good than they already are. I think that even without Light Clay, they're still so good in over-centralizing Giraffe and Missy, not necessarily Flittle, that they can get banned. Flittle, I want to see more from, because it's got this great potential, but I feel like it's definitely going to get banned eventually. But I will say, I want to see how it goes in Giraffe and Missy-less meta. Alright, but that should be all my thoughts on current meta. I'll update this again in case we get any more new bans. I'm hoping for Girafarig and Misdreavus and or Light Clay. Those would be cool. I understand if Flittle is going to get banned too, but I want to see how it does in not Giraffe missing meta. But that's everything. All right, well, thank you very much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. It takes a lot of time and effort to make these videos, and I appreciate that you're willing to at least hear me out. Hopefully this will make you better at Little Cup and more informed on the metagame. Thank you very much. Have a good day.